Hello there, listener. It is I, your host, Tristan. The Everything is Ruined podcast thing, whatever it is called. I can't remember anymore. You know why I can't remember anything anymore? It's my brain is too full of cool samurai shit now. Cool samurai shit like Aikido. Do you know what Aikido is? Oh, hey. Hey, Hassan. How's it going?
Yeah, hey,
do you know,
Tristan.
Do you know Aikido?
Yeah, I know
cool
Aikido.
Samurai shit, baby.
Yeah, sure, you're not wrong.
You ever seen a guy, like, get hit in the throat and go down and, like, die, essentially? I've seen that. I've seen
really?
Aikido.
Hey, Tristan, can I ask a question?
What?
Who have you been hanging out with recently?
Oh, you know, none other than your Lord and Savior, Steven Seagal.
That's what I was worried about. Do you know he didn't actually earn his belt, right?
Well, no, because, like, he mastered it so quickly he doesn't need a belt.
He just married into a family that had a dojo, and then the father died, and he just kind of went, now I'm the master, and I give myself the black belt.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, that's something that you could say. But realistically...
No, that's a fact.
Well, facts or whatever, because the true story is that he mastered Aikido in about, 2 months? And then he went and did a kumite. It's somewhere in Indonesia. And he killed 30 guys. Bare hands, baby. Cool samurai shit.
I don't think that's true about him. Pretty sure it's wrong.
Well, I mean, wait, really? It's wait, hold on.
That's definitely wrong. I mean, trust me, I'm an expert on samurai, and I can tell you one of the things about samurai is they fought a lot of demons, and Steven Seagal has not fought any demons.
Oh, that's. I think Steven Seagal. Here we go. I think Steven Seagal is on a regular basis fighting some demons.
More like he is the demon.
Yeah. He's a complicated person in that he is a monster. So, yeah.
Yes.
Well, there goes my cool samurai Steven Seagal bit. Fuck that, I guess.
Has he ever played a samurai? I assume so. But...
Oh, no, he's not. But he loves samurai shit. That's why.
But he must have played a samurai in something before, right?
He may have in more of his recent movies, but those things are too full of guns and shit that he's probably played a street samurai from their current day and age. He's got his katana. Well, that is a Beretta.
I don't think he has played a samurai.
I don't think so.
Surprise. Yeah. I would have thought that loser would totally do that.
He's done a lot more military stuff. He did specifically a really bad sniper movie, a really, really bad one.
That'd be more specific. That could be any of his movies.
Well, most of the time he's, well, it's true. That could be, because he does a lot of sniping in his movies. He is specifically a military sniper in Iraq. And it's such a shitty movie.
Sounds like him.
He's 350 pounds, give or take, these days. And this movie was done in his really heavy days. And you can tell he only did the sniper thing so he can lay down a lot and point a gun.
Oh, okay.
Because
that's funny.
And then occasionally he stands up and is shooting guys, but he's got he doesn't have the long trench coat anymore, but he's got the big flak vest, so it's hard to tell. And when he's moving around, they squeeze the frame in, so he looks thinner.
Nice.
It's good stuff. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about today Onimusha, the Netflix show.
Yeah, so for some reason...
Sorry, Onimusha, I should say.
Netflix and Capcom decided to make an animated series based on Onimusha.
Oh, yeah.
So there's going to be a bunch of preamble to kind of set up before we get to the TV show. So for anyone who doesn't know, Onimusha was a series of games.
Yeah.
Just trying to pull up the dates here. Basically, all on the PS2, I believe. So they
more or less.
were.
PS2 ran for a long time, right?
Yeah, they were all PS2.
Yeah.
So, there's
like...
4 main games. So there's the first Onimusha Warlords, Onimusha 2 Samurai's Destiny.
Yep.
Onimusha 3 Demon Siege, and then Onimusha Dawn of Dreams. There were some other ones in between, like Blade Warriors and Tactics. Not really going to count those.
Right.
Here.
I forgot there was a thing. Yeah.
Oh. So I really like Onimusha. I've only played 1 and 3. I couldn't tell you why I didn't end up playing 2, honestly.
2 is solid, but it did... So, just a quick aside. So 2 is solid, but it did kind of suffer from Devil May Cry 2 syndrome, which is like a brand new team took it over and tried to do a different thing.
Yeah, I think for me, I just missed it as a kid. I think it was, played Onimusha 1, didn't hear or realize 2 would come out, saw 3 was coming out, and was like, okay, well, I'll skip 2 and just play 3. Who cares?
I kind of get it.
I feel like that happened a lot in, the pre-360 days.
Yeah.
It was just a lot easier to, like, miss a game in a series and just go, whatever. I played 2 and 5 in this series.
Yep. Yeah.
That's just how it was.
Speaking of Devil May Cry, a friend of mine actually missed Devil May Cry 2 entirely. Like, played the first one, loved it, and then went those, like, 2 or 3 years that Devil May Cry 2 came out. Didn't realize it was a thing, and then Devil May Cry 4 came out like a couple years later. He's like, "Whoa, Devil May Cry 3, Devil May Cry 3, whoa, okay, what happened to the second one? Doesn't matter. Who cares?
It really doesn't.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Yeah. Especially in Devil May Cry, second one. Anyway,
yeah.
Onimusha 2 though is pretty good.
Sure. Yeah, I certainly hear that. All of the 4 games are pretty well liked. The 4th one, some people are not as into. They made some changes.
Yeah.
But generally, 1, 2, and 3 are all pretty well beloved.
Yeah.
But they aren't particularly popular games.
No.
In terms of, units sold, they were never mega blockbusters. The other thing I would say is anyone who I've met or heard talk about the Onimusha games, it's not the, characters and story that are massively drawing people in. Those are fine.
Yeah, true.
And one of the things about the characters of these games that is, I don't know if I would say it's important, but it is core to what the games have done, is that they feature historical figures. So 1 and 3, the main protagonist is Samanosuke Akechi, who was a famous samurai. The second game, Jubei Yagyu.
Yep. Hell yeah, Jubei.
So another famous samurai.
Yep.
The main villain, Nobunaga Oda.
Yep.
A incredibly famous figure in Japanese history.
Who the hell is Nobunaga? Nobody's ever heard of Nobunaga. Nobody made 40 fucking video games based off Nobunaga's revenge and shit.
Yeah, and then there's a bunch of other historical figures that show up in these games. On top of that, they tend to use the likenesses of famous individuals. So for 1 and 3, Samanosuke is based off of the actor Takeshi Kaneshiro. Jubei Yagyu, he's based off of Matsuda Yusaku. And then the third game, we have dual protagonists where not only is it that it's set in historical Japan, it's also set in modern day France, featuring Jean Reno for some reason. Man, I remember seeing the trailer and going, I don't understand why Jean Reno is here, but I am I am here for it. I am okay with that. I love Jean Reno. He's great.
Yeah.
Let's put him in this game for some reason.
He's awesome. Yeah, like he's a good actor.
Sword whip. Yeah, Jean Reno deserves a sword whip. Why not?
Yes, he does. I fully agree. And a cool motorcycle scene.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Rescuing his daughter. Like, yeah, of course that's what you do with Jean Reno.
And a big trench coat. Anyway, yeah. he's got a great...
Sick.
Yeah, hell yeah it is. He's got a great look in that game.
Yeah. But I don't understand why they made a TV series out of this. When you look at the Capcom's catalog of games and, things that you could make a TV series out of, and that Capcom has and that matter, and you just go, okay, well, hey, you obviously have currently big games, and some of these they've done things with, like your Resident Evil, and your Monster Hunter, but even above that, I'm just looking at a list of stuff, and it's like, okay, Darkstalkers, that definitely feels more popular than
Darkstalkers
Onimusha.
Well,
I much prefer Onimusha.
Yeah.
But Darkstalkers is a thing people seriously care about. They know those characters by name. You see fan art. You see people cosplaying it. There's an audience there for that.
I do feel that the fighting game stuff gets a little muffled sometimes. But anyway, yeah, I think I agree with you still, though. Go on.
Yeah. Dead Rising. That seems far more popular.
Yeah.
Lost Planet. Mega Man.
Never heard of those.
Oh, really? Well, let me tell you. Street Fighter's had animes in the past. Why not do a new one? So it's just a very weird choice that I just don't understand why this show exists and why they did Onimusha. In particular because the last full Onimusha game was the fourth one in 2006.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Since then, there was like two other things that I don't even think came out in the West. Like, they don't even have Wikipedia articles about them. So I'll be honest, I haven't looked super into it because I just know it's been dead. They did remaster the first game in 2018. That was over 5 years ago now. They haven't done anything since then. They haven't remastered any of the other games. They haven't re-released them. So I just don't understand what the impetus is here. Let's say this show did really, really well, and there's this groundswell of people going, yeah, we want Onimusha. What was Capcom's plan? To be like, oh, yeah, we don't have any games of this in development. It's going to be years before we can actually cash.
Well,
I mean, I guess you can go by the remaster of the first game.
Drew. Well, it could be a gauge on how popular Onimusha still is to see if anybody still cares. So that could be it. At least as far as the marketing purposes go, it could just be like
crazy to me that anyone would spend that kind of money, though.
Yeah, true. It could also be that like somebody just had like had an idea for a show and was just like, could we use the Onimusha brand and make this with Capcom's blessing? And they're like, yeah, we'll stick our name on it and make a little bit extra cash. Cool. That could have been it. It could have been.
It could have been. Again, I didn't look it up to see because this thing just confused me. They do have, I'm trying to find it here, an upcoming game that it definitely evoked. So it's Kunitsugami, Path of the Goddess. It's a little bit more mystical than Onimusha, but it definitely gave off vibes of Onimusha when I saw it, and I know the internet had a similar reaction. Like, is this a new Onimusha? And then the name gets revealed. It's like, okay, no, but kind of seems like it, so we're happy enough. And I think that's the thing is if Capcom just made a thing like Onimusha, I think people would be happy enough about that because I was saying the characters and the story and setting, I don't know that most people care, so getting into it. So the main things about the Onimusha game series are set in historical Japan.
Yep.
your character wields what is called the Oni Gauntlet, which is
that's right, the cool
big old jewel.
You suck souls into it,
and they wield that to fight against these monsters called the Genma.
I remember this now.
Who they are the sort of evil rivals of the Onis, and they basically genocided the Onis so that there are very few of them left alive.
Great. Awesome. Job, Genma.
That's really all of it. Like, there are some recurring characters, but at least for me and anyone I've known and seen talk about it, the characters and story are just not what you're there for. It's really the gameplay.
Really.
So the gameplay of these games is character action, but a very stiff character action. So
it definitely feels like a samurai game. Like, it simulates that style of swordplay pretty well, because it's all about kind of circling your opponent and striking when you need to, and like hitting the actual critical hits.
So the original idea for Onimusha was basically, hey, what if we took Resident Evil and made it samurai fighting?
Yeah.
You go, yeah, okay, that totally made right. Like, the literal Genma are these, monsters, zombie-ish in some ways. The camera is fixed angles in the first 3 games. It makes sense. And that's what people really care about. Now, getting into this Netflix series, so it came out in November. I'm not sure how involved they actually are, but it's directed by Takashi Miike, which, for anybody who doesn't know...
Whoa, hold on. No, wait, hold on. What?
So he's a pretty well-known and interesting Japanese film director.
Yeah,
so
he is.
Some of his bigger films are he did the sort of... I believe it's a remake, the 2010 version of 13 Assassins, as well as the movie Harakiri and Graveyard of Honor.
Yep.
But then he's also done some of them I love, some of them are weird, like Ichi the Killer, Gozu, but also Dead or Alive.
Mm-hmm. Some pretty racy stuff, so yeah.
Yeah, pretty weird guy. Doesn't really feel like there's much of him here, gonna be honest.
No.
It's also, so the show is written by, and I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with the writer, but Hideyuki Kurata, who he's done a ton of things. If you just look at his sort of credits, like he's done writing for Made in Abyss, Goblin Slayer.
Okay. Yep.
Rurouni Kenshin.
Oh, there we go.
Drifters, like a ton of big name stuff.
Yeah.
Now, lead writer, I don't know. Doesn't really matter. He did, however, do Oraimo, so gonna have to hold that against him.
Well, you can't win them all. Sometimes you gotta get paid.
Yeah, it's fair. That's fair. I'll concede that.
Maybe he wrote the episodes where there was about the guy not lusting over his sister.
Maybe that's true. There's no Oraimo in this. I'll say that.
What? Oh, I'm out.
So, I will say one of the. Oh my god! I need to look up his name now. Because they like to use the likenesses of famous actors and big name people. This is killing me. Why are you not giving me the name here? So the main character in this series is perhaps the most famous of all samurai, Musashi Miyamoto.
There it is. Good old Miyamoto Musashi. Yep.
However, they made his likeness modeled after Toshiro Mifune.
Okay, hell yeah.
Which is, one of the most famous Japanese actors ever.
I mean, like, the most famous samurai actor ever, in the West, at least, anyway.
Yes, definitely the most famous samurai actor. it's weird. I don't know. I don't know why they chose Musashi Miyamoto for this, because they don't tell you anything about him, and that's a problem throughout this.
Interesting.
So
That's weird.
Yeah. So the premise of the anime series is that some village, I don't even remember if they name it, but there's a village in the mountains. It got attacked by, and I'm honestly not sure if this is just the correct pronunciation or just a weird, I shouldn't say weird, but a Japanese pronunciation. This character, they pronounce it Yemen, but it's spelled Lemon, like lemon. So I'm going to pronounce it Yemen because that's how they pronounce it in the show.
Yeah, of course.
So I don't know if that's like the correct pronunciation or if it's a Japanese finding it hard to pronounce an L situation. Because it would also be weird if that was the case. Why would you have a character whose name is purposefully difficult to say, but who knows? But basically, he has, for some reason, taken over this village. And the sort of lord of the area has requested Musashi to go and stop him. And it starts with Musashi at this temple just fighting 30 guys.
Yeah.
Manages to beat them all. And the head monk basically goes, yep, you passed our test, so we're going to give you this box that'll help you on your quest like you asked for.
Okay, yeah.
Like, okay, it's clearly going to be the Oni Gauntlet.
Clearly. I assume.
But at this point, it's... why Musashi went to get the Oni Gauntlet, they don't tell you. And at no point throughout this do they ever explain why he went and got it. Because he doesn't know, as far as I can tell, he doesn't know about the Genma at this point.
Okay.
So there should
Weird.
be no reason for him to want the Oni Gauntlet. Because the Oni Gauntlet does give you power, regardless of whether you're fighting Genma. But why he felt he needed that power is unclear. It does not explain at all.
It's probably because he really wants that power, so he can hide in a tree for 2 days and then trick a little boy into a duel, so he can fight him and kill him in a duel, and therefore win much easier than.
No,
here's a fun little thing with Musashi.
They don't have him do much trickery stuff.
Oh,
they just have him as he's mostly so in this. I would put him somewhere at sort of mid 40s. So
sure,
I don't
know if he did that long.
I'm not sure.
I can't remember. Does he do any does he talk a lot? Because that was his thing. Okay,
he's a very He's sort of this slightly laid back.
Yeah, that checks out.
I wouldn't say prankster, but for example, in the second episode, I believe it is, he ends up to their so when he's leaving the temple, he's joining up with this group also sent by the lord of the area. There's just like I need to count 1, 2, 3, 5 other people. I want to say 5.
Sure.
And so he ends up having to kill, or before they go to bed that night, he mentions that there's 3 people who are bad guys in our party, and he ends up having to kill 2 of them. And then the next morning, they're like, "Wait, but you said there was 3, so which of us is bad?" And he's like, "Oh, no, I knew there was only 2. I said there was 3, so the rest of you would stay awake, and I could get a good night's sleep." Okay, that's a good representation of him, sure. That feels appropriate. But if you don't already know these things about this character, it does not explain anything about him. No backstory, no nothing. And jumping around in terms of the plot because I don't care about going chronological for it. So there are 8 episodes in this. I think it's episode 6. For like 10 seconds, we get to see that there is the how to explain this. So sort of jumping ahead.
Yeah, sure.
We haven't seen anything about the actual Yemen and what he's up to, any of that. We finally get just a brief moment in episode 6 where it's him up in the mountains. And I forget if they explain who it is, but it's kind of clear that he's talking to Kojiro Sasaki, who is the most famous rival of Musashi.
Yes. Yeah,
it doesn't explain that at all. So we see him briefly in episode 6, and then he shows up in episode 8, and they're just immediately like, yes, my number one rival. It's good to feel the blood flowing as I fight you again situation. You're like, what? If you do not intimately know Japanese history, so much of what is happening here, you're like, what? What's going on? I
think for anybody who is like layman on Miyamoto Musashi and his whole shtick, I think it would behoove you, before you watch the Onimusha show, to go and watch the 40-ish minute long episode of Puppet History about Musashi. It explains a lot about this guy that I thought was different, because in Japanese vernacular, typically Musashi is like the coolest dude ever, but he was a piece of crap.
That is true of most samurai, honestly.
Yeah, it's like, they're the coolest guys because samurai are cool. It's
that's
yeah.
In the same way that, in Europe, knights are portrayed as these chivalrous, noble men, when in reality they were going around drinking and raping. It's like the samurai were exactly the same. Yeah. The noble samurai spent their time drinking, gambling, raping.
As somebody who studied medieval history and that kind of stuff and medieval literature, it is super weird when the current vernacular depictions of, like, for instance, the Crusaders were... It's like, yeah, these guys are cool. They went on this big war and all this shit. It's like, no, they were not cool. They went to essentially like the Dark Ages Vietnam War. They lost that war, and then also they're all very bad people to a point where they had to change their names and then like lose their identity and go live somewhere else. Like, there's a reason why a lot of them went to Denmark. Yeah.
Yeah. Samurai, very much the same way.
Yeah.
but so when these two start, and I'll be honest, I'm not super familiar with either of them. I have heard the story of their fight just because it's kind of one of the most famous...
Legendary story, yeah.
Yeah. Folk story, I guess you would call it.
Yeah, sure. This is the one where he paddles a boat to the island, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that one.
But sort of at
carved the ore in the shape of a sword so you can beat him with it.
So I had to look at that because they end up fighting, and then at one point he Musashi does go Oni mode, and only once in the show, which is like, would have liked to see a little more. It's Onimusha. He goes that mode, and then he just stops, but then he puts down his sword and he picks up this ore. I'm like, wow,
no.
I had to go Wikipedia to look it up, and I was like, that's why he's doing this, is to reference this.
Yeah.
But you're not. It doesn't give any flashbacks. It doesn't show any backstory of Musashi to give you that context and go, hey, these two, you can pick up that Musashi killed Kojiro and that Kojiro was brought back by the Genma, but it does so little to tell you anything about their past story. It's like, no, you have to literally know the Japanese history to understand some of the events that are happening or why they would happen, which I could appreciate if this was only intended for a Japanese audience, but there's no way that was the goal here. There's no way that Netflix, they made this, and did not intend for this to be for a global audience, especially something based on a video game that, was sold outside Japan. It would be one thing if Onimusha was a series that's like, you had to import that game to play it. That was the only way. That was never really released officially in North America.
Sure, yeah.
That's not the case. So it's just this weird, like, why? It's like you had no concept for an international audience or consideration to them, which is weird.
Yeah. I mean, like, that could happen. But at the same time, like, I don't know. Like, it is a weird thing because they took a concept which is like this specific samurai, which is big in Japanese history, and is maybe the most famous samurai of all time. Sure, yes. However, the stories about this guy are way out of whack, and then like the actual game they're basing it off, like the framing is the video game they're basing it off for the show, is a game that hasn't seen the light of day since 2007, I think 2009,
2006 was
2006,
the last.
Yeah.
Release for it, yeah.
So, like,
yeah, I don't understand, and
I don't know.
I have a bunch of problems with the writing of this show. The main one being the way that this show feels is, I don't want to say it feels like it's a rough draft, but it feels like it didn't get reworks and iterations on it. And what I mean by that is various writing process, but usually the way that a piece of media will get written is a very loose outline of it will get written, just to like, here's the sort of main characters and the general outline of the plot, and then we're going to flesh in the details for kind of each episode and the events that happen.
Yep.
And then it's going to get storyboarded, just very loosely so that we can see it and go, oh. And then, the thing that really makes media, like television and films, and even to a certain extent, like video games or a variety of other things. But the thing that really helps make them good is that you take those things and then you go, oh, you know what? Actually, we should have this scene in episode 4. It should actually happen earlier in episode 2. Or, hey, we should, starting in episode 1, start hinting at this character's backstory or why their personality is this way, so that when it gets revealed in episode 7, there's an impact and a weight to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it feels like this just has none of that. That they just did like the initial writing of the story and the individual episodes, and it's like, no, we're stuck with this, whether it's we're crunched on time, whether it's whatever it is. It just feels like they didn't have time for that, because I mentioned like the main villain, Yemen, we don't get to really see him basically until episode 7 out of 8. And we have no idea why he's doing what he's doing. We don't get to hear any of his backstory until episode 8.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And he also basically immediately gets killed off. So when he finally shows up in front of Musashi, Kotaro just kills him. He's like, nah, screw this dude. I just agreed so I could fight you again, Musashi. Like, why? This whole time you've been talking about, Yemen and how bad a guy he is, and blah, blah, blah. And then you just immediately kill it. It's just the writing feels clunky in that way. Or another one is, so I think Hikaro is the character I'm thinking of, where, so Musashi is joined by, effectively 2 other samurai, and then one other guy who he has a sword and arrow, and he can kind of fight, but he's mostly there to sort of guide them, to carry their supplies and heal them and that, even though he's kind of the leader, but he's mostly not a fighter. But Hikaro is one of the guys who's supposed to be. At the 8 episodes, we basically get to see him fight a single time. I think the 2nd or 3rd episode. That's it.
Okay. Okay.
And then in episode 7, they Yemen basically sends down his evil, over-the-top British butler to go and murder them.
Excellent.
And so,
yes.
Yeah, it's pretty... he very much is meant, I think, to evoke Guildenstern from the games.
Oh, of course he does. Yeah. That makes sense.
The weird, crazy scientist.
Yep. Crypt Kicker motherfucker.
Yeah, so Hikaru's basically like, oh, I'm gonna have to use my technique. And his technique is just, he unsheathes his sword, and it creates this giant plume of sort of smoke. But it's like purple-colored smoke that it's basically like LSD.
Nice.
And that it gets like super activated when there's blood. So then he just ends up taking 2 arrows to the chest and dies. But because of that, the butler is like on LSD and just can't fight, and then gets killed. And you're like, okay, that was lame.
Yeah, that sounds pretty lame.
Like, this dude was literally had one fight earlier against just a bunch of the I forget what they're called, but they're the lowest tier characters from the Onimusha games, the sort of like zombie looking just infantry guys.
Yeah, the infantry soldiers, zombies. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it basically fights a group of them one time, and then exactly those guys, and then he dies this way, and that's basically it.
Well, what the fuck's the point? Like,
so there's another one. So they end up coming across this village at one point, and they end up rescuing this young girl. But she ends up getting kidnapped by some genma and then put inside this giant, probably like 5-foot tall bell that she's stuck in there, and then they light a fire around it. And so while Musashi is fighting those genma, they're like, oh, you're going to have to kill us quickly or she's going to die. The other guys are trying to get her out of there, and there's this monk who got sent along with the Oni Gauntlet to help them.
Yeah, okay.
So while the other 2 have a log kind of jammed under the bell, and they're trying to push it to leverage it and have the bell fall over, he's like, no, I'm gonna push it. And for some reason, he just does it barehanded instead of taking 2 seconds to say unwrap some cloth and put that around his hands for at least some protection or something. And he just ends up dying from these burn wounds. You're like, okay, but he didn't have to. Dude. The show feels like it just had this idea of, okay, Musashi is going to be joined by this group of people, but in a sort of Magnificent Seven style, they're all going to die one after the other throughout these battles.
You mean a Seven Samurai style?
That too, yes.
Wonderful.
Magnificent Seven is just always my reference point.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
But it doesn't do enough to make you care about those characters. Again, you get no backstory for any of these characters until episode 8, when it gives you Yemen's backstory and you see some of theirs. You're like, why? Why would you? It's that problem.
I had a whole backstory.
Yeah, it just dies.
Yeah,
the fucking what is this? This is my problem with a lot of Netflix shows out there. The like Netflix original things. A lot of them have this exact same feel, where like they just are trying to they sort of have to rush certain things, and like the backstories get like tossed to the wayside until the very end. And even then, like it's like the villain being revealed in like not until like the last episode. Sure, I get that, but every show is doing that now. Except for like apparently the One Piece Netflix show, where you got Buggy up front and center by like what, episode 2, 3 ish?
3, I think. 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Like there's a way to do it. There's a wrong way to do it.
A big problem with this is it should have gone one of 2 directions. So either they should have gone for way more episodes. It should have probably been 26 episodes, sort of a can't believe I'm saying this, but a classical full television series like we used to get, or it should have just been a movie. Made a 2-hour movie, cut down on things, tighten it up.
Yeah.
Because for the 8 episodes, and they're not long episodes, I think they're slightly longer than your traditional 22-minute TV series, but
like
I think they're
30
only
minutes.
a great amount of time. It's sort of like 2.5 hours or so, but then you're trying to make it more of a TV show, so you end up losing time because you have to make stuff work for individual episodes. So it just
episode 1 is 36 minutes, then it's 26, 28, etc. until the next one. Like one was just 22 minutes. Okay, so they don't.
Okay, yeah.
Interesting. All right, weird.
Yeah,
weird.
But it's just they either should have gone for just more episodes or just make it a movie, because what they're doing with this, it just doesn't work. And it's a shame, because I like Onimusha, and there are things about it I do like. I think the combat's not amazing, but it is decent enough.
Yeah. I mean, in the show or in the games?
I love the combat in the games.
Yeah, me too.
That's fantastic. I love those games. In the show, it's like, it's okay. However, visually, this show is drab.
It looks pretty brown, gotta say. I don't know why.
So, it has two problems. One, you're right. It's a very muted palette.
Yeah.
And
the guy looks pretty
ends
good,
up just meaning nothing really feels like it stands out. My other problem with it is, so this is a CGI series.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what you would specifically call the style of CGI animation that they are using. For me, I feel like I've seen this exact style multiple times already. It reminds me a lot of how they did the Tekken series.
Yeah, so here's the I was going to reference that, but I didn't want to put that pall upon this thing just in case. But yeah,
no, that is an accurate. Yeah, I think the Tekken one works better because two reasons. One, brighter color palette.
Sure.
And also two, Tekken character designs are meant to be. I shouldn't say meant to be, but they originate as being very blocky. Those games were actually, characters had square body parts, and so their designs are, you can see them out of the corner of your eye, and you can, immediately go, oh, that's Heihachi. Oh, that's God, I'm trying to think of all of his offsprings, but he's got King.
Oh yeah.
God, why can't I think of his kids' names? He's got
Jin.
A million of them. Yes, Jin. Thank you. Devil Jin. Boy, it doesn't matter. But Kuma is unfortunately not in. I think Kuma has he's shown as one of the fighters, but you don't get to see him fight, if I remember correctly.
All right, well then Nina. I'm not Tekken guys. I don't know. Yeah. The fact that he pulls it in my butthole is.
But I think that works a lot better there, and I've seen it in other series as well. Like, I would say the Dragon Prince feels like it is of a similar style, but using it's like layering on top of that and doing its own thing with it.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
It is not something where you look and you go like, wow, that looks like that, those animators are doing the exact same thing. It looks like they're, using kind of the same tools and the same ideas, but then doing their own art styles with it. Whereas Onimusha and Tekken, it just feels like, oh, you're just using the exact same animation software and tools and style. And I can't think what it is. I swear there are at least one or two other series that I have seen that are like this. That new series, Blue-Eyed Samurai.
Yeah.
That feels like it's going for a similar. It looks like that one is doing at least a little bit more to change up the art style, but yeah, looking at the show, it's not a great looker.
That's too bad. The shading looks pretty good. In still images, the shading looks pretty good. So
yeah, when it's moving, it doesn't look bad. It's just it doesn't look expensive. Is the way I would put it. I don't want to say it looks cheap, but what I would say is it just feels like it's lacking detail in a lot of places.
Sounds like they didn't try too hard in the visuals department, unfortunately. Or
not
at least
so much that they didn't try hard, just that they didn't have the funding to spend the time on it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's fair. That's too bad. I'm sure, especially in the visuals department, I'm sure somebody really wanted to do a good job here, because I'm sure there's somebody who's a giant Onimusha nerd on that team. There has to be. But I mean, if it all looks drab and gray and washed out and muddy and brown, I don't know, yeah, that does smack as an actual funding problem at the same time. But
across the show, that feels like the problem is that this was a show that was done relatively cheap, right? It didn't have the time for the writers to rework stuff, really make it
that's pretty sad
to make the characters work, to give them time to foreshadow things, or to we should add in this flashback kind of situation. The animation, it feels that way. The voice acting, I do think, is quite good.
Okay,
I think
sure,
that is solid across the board.
Nothing wrong with that. That's good.
But it's a shame that it is hard for me to imagine somebody watching this and then going, man, yeah, I really want to play the Onimusha games, because
I mean,
this show also it does not explain to you anything about who or what the genma are, the Oni. There's, as far as I'm aware, there are no hints, references, Easter eggs, anything to the characters and stories from the past games. It doesn't feel, going back to what I was speaking about earlier of I'm not sure why this show exists. Watching this, I do not picture someone coming out of it and going, yeah, I really want to play Onimusha. And
not that they could
TV
anyway.
shows don't always do that. Cyberpunk, Edge Runners certainly did that.
That did it for me. I jumped right into that game.
Castlevania TV series, that one, that's a little bit hard to imagine that somebody who's unfamiliar with Castlevania would watch that anime series and go, oh, I really want to play those games. And then, mostly all you can play are the 2D games. And you're like, this is very different from this TV show where characters are doing these, backflips and shooting out ice beams and flying through the air, as opposed to this game where, it's...
Yeah. It's, a adaptive representation. I have two solutions for you, for video game solutions for you, for both Castlevania and Onimusha. Because you can't really... Unless you want to pay or pirate a copy of Onimusha or pay eBay prices for it.
And they did re-release the first one at least. So
did
that
they?
one
Okay, well, you can play that one.
Well, remaster, sorry.
Sure. That's fine. So you can play that one if you really want to. But I would argue that that game is great. I would say that's probably a good solution. But I think that if you want a really good Castlevania game, you should play Bloodborne instead. And if you want a really good Onimusha game, Sekiro actually really scratches that itch. It does, actually.
To me, Sekiro is a bit too...
it's maybe not as arcadey as Onimusha is.
I was going to say it's too arcade. The way you're doing the jumping around, the backflips.
Oh, okay, there's that. There's
grappling hand. To me, Onimusha is a little bit more Bushido Blade. Very.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Stiff
Actually,
movement. Your character is not, fast. You're not having, the way that sort of your character dodge rolls. To me, that's just very not Onimusha. I get what you're going for, and I certainly think somebody who likes Onimusha could like that series, but
it scratches that itch.
Yeah, certainly.
Demons, sword fighting, samurai.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot there. Visually, too, I would even say a lot of the sort of looks of the infantry character villains. They very much look.
It's pretty clear that like the people who made Sekiro also really liked Onimusha. Like, there's even stuff I pointed like, isn't that from Onimusha? And like I look it up, it's like, oh, it's like practically the same design. Like that's what the From Software does that a lot, where they'll crib from things they like so hard that it might as well just be the thing. So yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah.
So to wrap up,
yeah.
Personally, I would not suggest this Onimusha TV series. It's not terrible. I didn't hate my time with it. It's just not particularly good. And if you're a big Onimusha fan, I just don't see it giving much satisfaction from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking forward, what would I like out of Onimusha? Certainly more of this TV show. My answer is going to be no.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you told me what about a completely different thing, I still think my answer would be no, just because, again...
Yeah, I hear you.
I don't care about those characters. I'm not clamoring at the bit going, man, I want to see more of Samanosuke.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
Maybe if you did something in the style of the opening cinematic of the third game, I'd be all down for
that third game is a masterpiece,
that is still
man.
An all-time great video game cinematic. That opening is really good.
Yeah, that's what you can tell they're like getting their sea legs around like Resident Evil 4 into that game. Like, yeah, let's get that team in there.
Yeah. I would like to see more Onimusha games. But I would also say it is hard for me to envisage what an Onimusha game looks like today. Where
yeah, I hear you.
They basically have not made one of those in 20 years. Video games have advanced in so many ways. I would love to see what that is, but I also know it would. There's a lot of things that would need to change about those games in like 2020, whatever year it would end up, coming out for there to be one.
2025, 2026.
That would only be if they'd been working on it for at least 2 to 3 years already.
Yeah, I mean, they may have been, but I doubt it.
No chance.
No chance. What was I going to say? So basically, like, the thing is that, like, I think Onimusha... Yeah, I think they maybe should have just left this one alone. Because if you look at, like, the way things have changed for video games, especially with, like, games like Onimusha, where, like, taking controls and all that stuff, like, Devil May Cry went through a lot of the same growing pains, and then eventually became Devil May Cry, and then, like, Devil May Cry 4 and 5, or 5 especially, is like masterclass character action. And then, but like the things that like you can point out even differences between like 5 and like Devil May Cry 5 and 3 are like leaps and bounds like apart, because there's no more fixed camera, there's no more of like the weird way controlling Dante feels like it's all very like it's much more tighter, it's more like it feels good to control these characters now. And in Onimusha, because they the reason they chose the take controls from Resident Evil and like that style of gameplay, but then put samurais in there, was to kind of make you feel a little bit against the wall. And I don't know how they're going to, or if they're going to do that. If they do that, how they're going to actually make that work.
Yeah, for me, what I want is what Capcom seems to potentially be doing with that Princess game, which is give me a spiritual successor that's not necessarily bound by certain things, that still gives me that same feeling and evokes a lot of what Onimusha was, but can change things up and not upset anyone because, hey, it's a new thing. It doesn't have to have those things. It doesn't need it to be, actual, real famous people. So that also feels a little bit silly now.
A little bit.
Back to the games, you're like, especially when you start playing 3, and you're like, so
why is Jean here?
Nobunaga just had a giant demon army.
Yes, it's fine.
And then for the next 400 or 500 years, everyone just forgot demons existed.
Don't worry about it.
That seems weird.
Don't worry about it.
There's a literal Oni in those
fine.
Games, wandering around. What happened to them? Where did they go? Why does no one know about these things until all of a sudden they show up again in the future for Jean Reno?
Again, don't worry about it. It's fine.
Yeah. So, a Soul Successor is really what I want out of the Onimusha series. It's not necessarily a new one, but something that evokes those games and does a lot of what they did, but also forges its own path so as to not be beholden.
I can see what you're saying with there, because I think that's the only real way to go at this point. I don't know, what would you want out of a Onimusha? Better question, actually. What would you want out of if you could redo the Onimusha show? What would you want out of it?
What I want out of it, I mean, visuals are number one. I would fix. I think I would actually focus more on the story. So my honest answer would be, why not make it more of kind of an origins thing? Show us a time when there were more Oni were fighting the Genma. Go more into that and talk about it, because this has almost none of that, right?
Yeah,
so
okay.
Have show us why we should care about the world of Onimusha, right? Why I should get invested into this and be a fan of this thing, as opposed to what they did, which is has almost none of that. So it's a thing of, if you didn't already know Onimusha, I can't see that this show makes you excited for anything else Onimusha, because you're not going to care about the Genma. It doesn't do anything with them. They're just these unexplained monsters. You're not going to care about the Oni. It doesn't do anything to make you, feel sad for them, to explain their backstories, anything like that. So I think that would be my main focus. If you sat here and said, you can make an Onimusha movie or TV show, it's okay. Well, let's make people care about the world of Onimusha, right? Who cares who the main historical figure is? Mm-hmm. Because you can replace those from game to game, but the Oni gauntlet and using that to fight the Genma is the core of this. Let's make people care about those things.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think this is about a good place to wrap it up, unless you have anything else you wanted to say.
No, that's all I had.
All right. Well, I have one more suggestion for you, Hassan. I think that you should actually, instead of playing Onimusha, you should watch the greatest samurai film of all time, Hard to Kill. It's a masterpiece, and I think that it's the greatest. Well, all right.
To be honest, even when I was 12, 13, I thought Steven Seagal sucked.
Well, then, can I interest you in 2016's The Perfect Weapon? I think that is the greatest Steven Seagal movie of all time. No. Perfectly encapsulates what Onimusha was going for.
Unless it being a literal sack of garbage is the perfect weapon, I don't think that's an accurate title.
I wouldn't say that. I think that movie is at least 4 out of 20.
That still seems too high.
Well, how about 2012's Maximum Conviction? That's a movie.
Steven Seagal does not have conviction. He should be convicted, though.
Fair enough. Well, I guess in that case, then, the only thing you can really do if you want your fix of samurais is to watch our show and go to our Twitter, which is at EIFNAR. Yep, go to there and, wade into the pool that is Twitter, the war zone that is Twitter, and just start swinging away. Use your cool Aikido moves and just beat some people up. Preferably people who cannot fight back.
Yeah, checks out.
Yeah.
100% checks out.
Yeah, fuck them. Then you should also go to our Spotify, iTunes, and also our YouTube page and like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Because if you don't, then I, the leading expert on Steven Seagal and his life, his acolyte, if you will, and going to go there and I'm going to break all your limbs, boy.
Yeah, I don't think a Steven Seagal acolyte's going to be very good at fighting.
See, what I'm going to do is here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take your wrist and I'm going to do this. And then when I do this, you're going to flip over. And then I'm going to step on you a little bit.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to flip over.
Yeah, you are.
How that works in real life.
Yeah, I'm going to use a wrist lock flip kind of thing. That's Aikido.
Okay.
Yeah. Better watch out.
Sure.
It's going to be cool. It's going to go on TikTok.
Oh.
Your kids love TikTok.
Yeah, they all love you on TikTok, Steven Seagal.
Excellent. They better. You should also go to our friend's site, which is DJDane.com. That's the guy that does our music. That's the, go there, listen to his great tunes, and I don't know, just like, maybe give him a gun.
Okay.
Maybe also watch A Dangerous Man with him. 2009's A Dangerous Man. Guess who the dangerous man is, Hassan? Steven Seagal, the world's greatest samurai.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah. Steven Seagal. Anyway, that is it for our show. Tune in next time for another Excerpts episode of Everything is Fine, Nothing is Ruined. See ya.
Say it. You are correct. You win.